appreciate it. I've been doing these roundtables across the district, so just to remind you all, I'm sure you all know this, but this Western District of Montana is 16 counties and 2 tribal nations. So it's basically between Glacier and Yellowstone National Parks. It's Flathead County, Glacier, and then it kind of wraps around. It has Butte, it has, and then it stops at Gallatin County. So we got this second district. This is all just kind of background and context, but it all leads to the housing. So we got this second district because of the 2020 census. First state in the country to lose a seat and get it back. And since then, we've been the fastest growing area in the country. So the housing pressures here are across age. If you ask 18-year-olds right now, what do you care about? They can't find a place to live. If any of you guys have kids, like I have a 20-year-old and that's their issue. Met with some seniors in one of the towns in the district, women in their 70s and early 80s, don't have a place to live, don't have anywhere to go. So it's across age, it's urban and rural, and in Granite County, I met with a contractor there who said can't hire people because they can't find a place to live. In the hospitals that I've met with across the district, can't hire people because they can't find a place to live. So, the issue in this district is really housing, housing, and housing. And when people say their biggest issue is labor, it really kind of comes to housing, teachers, law enforcement, all of that. So what I've been wanting to do and trying to do throughout the district is really saying, what is it in your town, in your area, that is really driving the issues here specifically? What are the issues you're facing, and what are the solutions that we could reach together? So all of the different component parts of that, like property taxes are one piece of that, right? We just saw what happened with the realtors. So that's one piece of it, but really if the housing, and if I'm gonna frame it in the way I'm kind of thinking about it, but educate me, change my mind if I'm wrong, let me know. But I kind of think of it, and there's sort of the 3 buckets of the hard costs, which are labor and just the supplies, right? Like what it takes to actually build something. And then the land costs, like those are sort of a separate bucket. And then the soft costs, like the transaction fees or the financing or interest rates. So in Whitefish, for example, one of the things that they're doing, and this is happening in Missoula as well, they're a little bit further along in Whitefish, they have a program where they're divesting ownership of the land from the housing. And so some of you may be more aware of or better informed about that than I am. But I also saw that in Missoula, and in Big Sky, they had a trust buy up this strip of land. If any of you have been up to Big Sky, it's that little strip of land between the river and the road. And they had kind of like said, this is never gonna be used for anything, but then they're building these houses in there. So sort of creative uses of land to figure out how they're gonna get to affordable housing. So we've done these in, Kalispell, Whitefish, Big Sky, and really just wanting to hear, like, what are the issues in Butte Silverbow leading to a potential, like, what are the things that we can do as your federal partners, working with you locally? What are the things that you need, and how can I do that for you in Congress? So how can we partner to bring solutions to the people that we serve? So that's kind of my starting point, and then basically I don't want to talk again for the rest of this hour because I want to hear from you, but I just want to frame that as kind of, that's what I'm thinking of. That's why we're here, and so hopefully the takeaway would be you're feeding into this sort of information that we're building and developing that will address the housing crisis in Western Montana. And then we would come back through with, okay, now we're starting to work on maybe some legislation. What does this look like? How should it be tweaked? So those are the layers that we're hoping to. So we'll go around, and why don't we start with you as the big chief who has. Oh, happy birthday!
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a crazy day.
You want to sing or pray? Those are your choices.
I can't do either of those right here. So
okay.
You don't want to hear me sing.
Okay, well then I'll do it. Okay, go ahead, JP.
So, locally, we're seeing the pressures of, affordable housing, and we have housing stock. The issues that we have here is the quality of housing stock that we have. But we've been working on initiatives here locally, as soon as we saw, this coming, we created an affordable housing committee right off the bat. With the state of Montana had theirs, we created one as well to be reactive to the needs of the community. And from that, we updated our housing plan, which allows us to be proactive and ready for any kind of funding that is available federally. So as programs come out, we do that. But one of the main things that we did right away is, you talk about housing, it goes hand in hand with workforce as well, though, because our contractors talk about having a hard time getting the workers that they need in there. So we partnered with Highlands College, gave them $1 million for workforce development. Specifically, they are building houses out at Highlands College now. They've got one that they're ready to market. We're going to work with them about land here in Butte Silver Bow so that they can put that on that to allow for, it's only one piece of affordable housing, but it's a start. And that they can continue to build that stock while they're training staff.
I was gonna ask you, so are those people who are actually doing trades programs?
They're doing trades programs at Highlands, and it was specific towards trades programs.
Okay.
And so this is in their carpentry, and before they were building walls and then tearing them down, and just they weren't able to really construct anything. And this is allowing them to go from start to finish, building a house, learn the trade. They're leaving those programs now, and they'll be well suited to go out into the workforce. And
So they're getting a degree and getting paid.
they're getting a degree and they're getting paid, and they could continue that degree field on if they wanted to go into construction engineering up to Montana Tech. So that allows for that. So that's a partnership that we work with Montana Tech that is successful, and we can see that that's going to turn over. And so as they find, when they put that house on a lot, we work together to get it there, then they can sell that house to somebody that couldn't otherwise afford it. They can turn that over and then start another project again and continue that training as well. So we've worked on that. Locally we're doing a lot of other things. We're rewriting our zoning. We've updated the housing plan, as I said. We've have an uptown master plan. We're doing a South Butte infrastructure analysis to see where we can expand our infrastructure, so that where there's new development. And so we have to work with our community partners, and that's when we worked with our affordable housing and with our housing plan. We had to work with the people that are impacted by it, that see the people that are most in need in that. So Action Inc. and Buttes are they're working on this. They're building houses. There are 7 of them. They're being built right now. We're addressing the needs here, but is it fast enough? The one thing that Butte has is we have stock, so we can, when you look at old houses,
You have supply.
we have supply, but the cost to redo that. So when we're having to find funding for the supply, we've got big old buildings that are really in the right place to be redeveloped, but the cost, if it's more than 3 floors, you've got to have fire suppression in there, so the cost of that, and then upgrading all electrical and plumbing. So when people are redeveloping them, they're not really bringing them back as affordable housing stock because of the cost to redevelop them.
Yeah.
They're asking for a price that is out of the range of what somebody that's looking for affordable housing. So when you talk about, I've got the 22-year-old as well that's living in Missoula, sharing a house with 5 girls, and they're paying $2,900 a month.
Yeah.
Those are the things we don't want to have happen here, but it's trickling over to Butte.
So the cost of redoing a supply is making it outside the. A couple questions I'm gonna throw at you, and if maybe others can speak to these, just things I'm hearing. I'd like to hear, if anything, if you have anything that maybe you don't, nursing homes in Butte, and then these are all totally unrelated. The chassis for mobile homes and whether or not that is financeable, or if any of you know anything about that. It's kind of come up in other areas. And then the third one is EMI. And maybe can that be shifted so that people qualify for affordable housing? And if you could speak to any of those, or if you wanna pass,
Well,
that's fine. But-
Yeah, I mean, those are topics that I'm not really familiar with a lot of those, but you know, some of the things that we can work with locally here is that we have land that we can work with, in Butte. We had the Tullymore edition that was offered here in Butte a number of years ago. We have lands that are coming into our possession that have infrastructure to that we can work with locally, that we can work with developers, you know, our real estate agents, our developers, to say, okay, we have the land available, we need you to develop this, but we need to make this affordable housing. And so we have that ability here locally with infrastructure to the land that's available. And so that's taken some of our redeveloped lands that we're going to assume from Atlantic Ridgefield that we're able to put back out in the market. And it gives us a distinct advantage, I believe, to you know, work on that affordable housing. And the hard part about it is, you know, what is affordable?
Right.
You know, the market drives it, and that's the hard thing. And you know, when we get some of these, you know, when we get our property tax relief and we get that check in the mail, the people that are renting are not getting that check back, and the people that they're renting for are not generally passing along because the market drives what they're charging for the rents.
So let's keep going around the room, but did you all send the property tax bills out last fall? Or did you do the 78%?
We did the 78,
Okay,
and yeah,
so-
we did what
Okay.
49 of the other counties did to try to give the residents of Butte a break on that. And so I think there was a misconception that now they're getting charged more.
Yeah.
They really aren't. We
Yeah.
were trying to you know, show that, you know, as I said with the governor, we need to figure out property tax reform, and we got to quit pointing fingers, and we need to work together on this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So did the bills just go out, or I
Bills-
just got mine yesterday?
bills just went out, and so
So you got
We all got it.
yeah.
This week.
And people
Okay.
don't really understand what that
Yeah.
is. They see it's a property tax increase, and it really
You all
wasn't.
are popular right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
If we were to do it over again, we probably would have just did the 95 mils, and then if we happen to be successful, then you can send a rebate check. But you know, we didn't want to have to go back and try to do that through the finance and budget, because that's even a worse nightmare to do it.
Glacier and Madison counties did the fall collection,
Yeah.
so.
And so
There.
did Anaconda Deer Lodge. Yeah.
Yeah, and, okay, all right, and then if you want to say your name and kind of your, expertise.
Absolutely, yeah, my name is Gary Shea, and I'm a local realtor here. I've been a realtor in the community now for about 25 years. And, you know, our issues in Butte are, you know, similar to things you mentioned. To summarize it, it's supply and affordability, right? We're still the most affordable market in Montana for a community of any size, so that's a really good thing. But affordability has gotten tough for our working force, and that's very common throughout Montana. It's common throughout the country. And so I'm going to take a little bit of a different take on it here than you might hear in other places. You know, the regulatory things, I know you hear a lot, the infrastructure build out, which is really important. I think you hear a lot. But at the federal level, some of the things that can be done are to do things to the federal tax policy. So as an example, if the problem is supply, what are some tax policies that can be done to help supply? And some of the ideas that are out there on the table now at the federal level is to, there's a lot of single family homes that are owned by investors, right? Investors want to buy homes with returns. And then, you know, in addition to that, back in the Great Recession, when the value of single family homes really went down, a whole bunch of houses got bought by investors. So if you can free up that supply of houses that investors own to owner occupants, that would help out the problem, right? So the idea is to offer to investors some type of a tax incentive to free up that house. For example, give them a tax credit or reduce their capital gains credit, you know, something along those lines. So that's just one idea of how federal tax policy can help out this supply problem. Another one, and this is really bigger in a bigger issue in other states, but it's a bigger issue in Montana than I realized until I saw some of the data on it. Is that, you know, if for single family homes, if you sell a single family home, there's an exclusion that we're all probably pretty
Right,
familiar with.
the,
$250 for
homestead
single filers, $500 for married filing joint. Well, that was done back in 1997. It was never indexed for inflation, right? So, and those are big numbers, but
Yeah.
now over 30% of homeowners in Montana, and probably less in Silver Bowl County, but in Montana, but 30% have their gains that are above the exclusion amount. And the studies show that because of that, some of those folks are not selling and releasing those homes to new buyers. So that's just,
incentivize the, yeah, got it.
yeah, so
Okay.
the idea would be to increase that, like as an example, increase for single filers from 250 to 500, married filers from 500 to a million.
Yep.
And then, most people would be under that exclusion because the idea behind it is to, not tax people
Right.
that sell their single family homes unless it's a really big gain. So those are just a couple of examples. And our association at the national level has a lot of ideas that are out there. I'd be happy to get you. That's kind of the general idea. And that's on the offensive side. And on the defensive side, there's some of the ideas out there to raise revenues at the federal level are to increase the capital gains tax. Well, if you do that, that's going to have a negative effect on housing because it's going to affect investors that want to, invest and to provide this housing would have gains. So, and another idea that's out there is to begin taxing unrealized gains, which again would hurt the investor community that are developers that are trying to create single family homes. So,
So you would say, go slowly, or be cautious about it.
yes, right.
Or don't go at all.
Don't go at all is
Okay.
our position
Got
on
it. Okay, got it.
Right.
What about commercial real estate in Butte?
Commercial real estate in Butte is doing much better than it has for a long, long time. Now, it's still the weakest component of our real estate world, but it is doing much better. We see on the new construction, we're seeing the new construction into commercial, and also there is existing commercial properties are being built or being bought and being redeveloped oftentimes for other uses. And one of the points that JP was making is that we got a lot of big buildings in Butte, right?
Office space, industry, yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of residential on the upper floors. Most of the
Okay.
buildings in Butte that were built back in the day, they were commercial on the lower floor, but they were residential up on the upper floor. They were either apartments or there were, but there has been, everyone around this table knows pretty good, in recent years, there's one or two big projects happening every year.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and there's a couple.
New build or?
Well, there's new build, and also in Uptown Butte, there's redevelopment of these bigger buildings. And that's gonna be really important to add the supply for renters, because
Yeah.
a lot of them are being, developed and
Yeah.
being held for rental, and then there are some that are being redeveloped and condoed out. and
So
being
the
sold.
rental market in Butte is?
It's like the sale market, it's getting difficult for
Okay.
the working force. Rents are certainly going up, and it's the same issue with sales. It's a supply issue. So
Okay.
so anything that can be done, tax policy, regulatory wise, to make the regulatory process more efficient and less costly, because all those costs get passed on, right? Are all positive things. And then I think another really important thing in Butte is that we're really developed for future growth and for new construction to add supply, is that we are really built out to our infrastructure, right? Where our water and our sewer is, and we have very few places for infill development. And the ones that we've had, some subdivisions have been done, and it's been great, it's added supply, they've done really well, it's been good for the community, it's been good for the developers that have done it. But there's not a lot of places that are big enough land for it to do a single family home development of any size, or even a multi-family development. So what would really be helpful in Butte would be, and I think that JP touched upon a little bit, is infrastructure development. We have a lot of land south of Butte that can be developed, and the challenge for developers is just the cost of doing that. It not only makes it riskier, but also they gotta pass that cost on to the final user. That if there's anything that the federal government or state government or local governments can do to help out with that infrastructure development, I think is really important. And kind of an example of that is what happened up in Seavey. I don't know that story completely, but my understanding is the sewer, they didn't have the sewer, and so the cost of houses up there got out of line with the working force, and the end result was they lost a big employer. So, that partnership of infrastructure development between the developers and the governments, I think, is really helpful in a lot of communities. And I think particularly in Butte, I think that'd be a really, really
Okay.
wonderful thing.
Good, great, thank you,
Just
Gary.
do a time check,
Let's
we
go.
got, I know we started a little late, but we got like 35 minutes, just so. Just wanna let you know.
No, you're good. So Kristen Rosa, and I work mostly in economic development, so I'm very concerned about housing because for us to keep growing our economy, we need to make sure that housing is affordable. So, and then in community development, do work with, tax increment financing. We've used that a lot. So some of these buildings that we're talking about uptown, our urban renewal district is very involved in trying to make sure that they can supplement and help with the cost of doing that ingress and egress in those fire suppression systems. And I know we're looking at maybe even upping those programs because we do see that getting those upper stories built out as housing is very difficult and can be very expensive. And then to JP's point, they come out at very high price points.
Mhm.
So they're not affordable housing. They're not helping with the problem we have. But I'm all in trying to make sure that we keep our
Mhm.
housing affordable in our area because it is one of our major points of attraction at this
Mhm.
point. We are working with a local developer, or not a local developer, but a developer that would hopefully be able to help us address, a manufactured housing
Mhm.
development, or manufacturer. And
What was
crossing
that
our
that I
fingers.
saw in the news about the business here that's manufacturing?
So,
Is that?
we
Sorry,
had one.
Like it sounds like.
Yeah, we had a small one that was trying to make a go of it, but when interest rates went up, the demand for their houses really went down. The interest rates really caused that business to close their doors because they could not fulfill the model that they were trying to do. They have a lot of demand for their houses,
Yeah.
but as soon as interest rates went up, the cost of them just was
Yeah.
too much for
Okay.
the market that they were hitting. We are working with a developer that would come in and build manufactured houses on a much larger scale.
Okay.
And we'll, they're still in the process of working that out, but hopefully that could help with some of that. And I know we are,
Yeah.
through the housing plan, we're looking at community land trusts and things like that also.
For the industrial space that they would need?
No,
Or
for the housing
or
developments.
for
I
housing,
mean,
okay.
as we've
Got
talked, you gotta keep the land
Yeah.
ownership separate from the home ownership to guarantee they stay affordable. I mean, that seems to be the biggest.
And
Um,
is there a model of that in Butte right now, or
We
would
do.
this be a new?
This would be new.
Okay, so you're looking to figure out what that would look like
Yep.
and what the incentives are and how it could work?
Yeah, the Missoula and
Okay.
Whitefish have kind of used,
Okay,
and we're
oh,
looking
that's good
towards
to know.
them. Yeah.
Okay, good to
yeah.
know. So it's, you're looking for that too?
Yes.
Federal things that work for you, that you like, that you'd like to see, scaled up, or things that you
So
are
I
on
know
your
we've
wish
used
list?
a lot of community development block grants and things like that. We'd like to see those continue,
Okay,
maybe even beef those up.
those are coming straight into your.
They come through
bank
the state
account.
and then they come into us. We don't get
Okay.
them. We're not a city of 50,000, so we don't get a direct CBDG allotment. We have to apply for grants.
One of the things that I heard that the counties really liked was the ARPA money came directly to them for pushing out, and across the board, people have said that is a model that they liked, and
Yeah,
I can see why, but, so,
getting money through the state can sometimes be cumbersome.
yeah, it could only be built on a sewer, maybe you don't need a sewer, but,
Yeah.
okay, let's keep going.
So, my name is Julie Crane, I am the planning director. I'm new to the position, and in 2020, the comprehensive plan for Butte Silverbow was passed by the planning board and the council of commissioners, and that
21?
guides 2020.
2020.
And that guides the vision for the community, and then the regulatory instrument to implement that vision is the zoning code, which is an ordinance held in our municipal system at the city county. And we're undergoing a rewrite of that.
In compliance with any state law, or?
We would be in compliance with state law, yes, but
Okay.
the implementation elements of the comprehensive plan. So the growth policy is required by state law, and then we are required to develop a policy to implement
Okay,
that vision in a regulatory space, and that's the zoning ordinance that guides development protocols. And so in this rewrite, we're looking at the existing conditions in the county to look at lot sizes and lot minimums to potentially support more infill development in areas of the community where there is infrastructure in existence, which will be very key to allowing, you know, maybe vacant lots to be constructed upon. Or looking at how multifamily housing can be placed in varying districts throughout the community.
Is
And
the first one of, or both of those, the uptown piece of it, or?
The zoning
they-
ordinance would be apply to all zoned areas in Somerville County.
Okay,
And that would be, we're working through that, we're just initiating that process and looking to have that completed in the fall to the winter
okay,
of this year. Additional work that we do within our department, we collaborate with the Community Development Office. The strategic housing plan will hopefully become an attachment to the comprehensive plan so that its goals and objectives guide how the zoning ordinance is written to implement housing priorities, which includes considering additional housing development types or development styles so that we can provide for additional density, which can in turn provide for additional affordability. In particular, one of the things that I think we deal with often is the redevelopment costs associated with the redevelopment of existing buildings. Fire suppression is an incredibly expensive endeavor, and in addition to the work that the Community Development Office is doing, if there were potential opportunities for federal funding to come through that would allow developers or building owners to gain access to funding for that particular element, particularly compliance with International Building Code or International Residential Building Code, to provide for fire suppression, I think would be a huge difference in limiting the investment costs for infrastructure in those buildings, because we have approximately 500,000 to 1 million square feet for housing potential in Uptown alone,
if you could
if we could
trigger that piece.
trigger that. So,
Interesting.
What
that's,
is that number?
it's, and please don't quote me on this, between 500,000 and 1 million
Yeah.
square feet.
Yeah, a big range.
A big range.
But,
A big
you know,
range.
there's a lot of square feet.
Exactly, there's a substantial amount
Yeah,
of square footage.
yeah.
So that's one thing that I think is really important to kind of take into consideration, and I think would be really helpful to the redevelopment of many of these buildings and getting them occupied.
What is the biggest tension point that you're hearing, if there's any public input on any of the zoning, what's the biggest pain point on zoning? And
Our zoning code is over 50 years old, and so it doesn't really keep up with the change in best practice in zoning, so that is something that we struggle with. And in particular, when the zoning ordinance was developed, it demanded sort of this character in the community where very large lot sizes were required for redevelopment. And I think looking at that from a nuisance perspective of, you know, providing enough space between neighbors, but also making sure that things are set back from their neighbors so that there wasn't risk of fire or something of that nature. However, people own these parcels and they want to redevelop them, but then they're constrained to building a very small structure on a lot so that they can meet the setback requirements. And so I think that's a struggle point for some developers. And then we have a lot of land that has potential for redevelopment, but we just can't quite redevelop that yet because it's not in Butte Silverbo's ownership. And so we have ideas about that, but really the age of the zoning ordinance and the need for best practice in zoning is something that we're really taking a good hard look at in our community.
okay,
Yeah.
interesting. So many questions.
And in terms of that, we have one additional program that's run from the Superfund department. We have redevelopment trust funds that can help any developer who's developing in a mining impacted neighborhood with the excavation costs and the disposal of their contaminated waste if they're present. And we pay for infrastructure connections to those lots to help incentivize redevelopment in mining impacted neighborhoods.
Okay,
So the
potentially some
7
federal
homes.
opportunities there.
Yeah, and those
Yeah.
are paired often, Barbara Miller would speak to this, with USDA Rural Development and CDBG funds as well.
Okay. Thanks, Julie.
Hi, I'm
Go.
Kelly Sullivan. I'm with Butte Local Development Corporation. I'm also the Executive Director of Headwaters RC&D. And I maybe want to speak a little bit to the region. So Headwaters is the
Great.
economic development org for the 7 counties, including Butte, Silverbow, And we have seen different things with housing in the region. In Drummond, for example, the school district is starting to invest in housing in order to keep teachers.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's a huge.
it's
Are they
really-
doing mobile homes, pods?
They're doing just little homes,
Tiny
just little
homes.
homes that they can
Yeah.
find in their community, and, you know, there's not a lot of inventory. What we do every 5 years is develop a comprehensive economic development strategy for the Headwaters region. And the biggest thing we heard from every one of our 11 communities in that region is housing, as you said, housing,
Yeah.
housing.
Yeah,
Which ties into workforce, which ties into childcare.
everything.
Yeah, so in Madison County, we're helping them with the development of a housing plan. There's a consultant called Highlight Engineering that's working on that.
They have fascinating issues with the.
Yeah,
I mean-
they've got Big
Right,
Sky
they've got it
is
all.
kind of the outlier in Madison County, and then you've got,
Yeah,
you know, the other little communities.
yeah.
In Dillon, they're thinking of looking at a TIF district for housing, and that's just a very new concept for them. We're having a meeting in a couple of weeks to try to talk about some of that. But we're
That's-
definitely seeing it throughout, and we haven't really taken a deep dive into housing with, you know, other than a few of the things I just mentioned.
So would it make sense to do almost like a regional meeting of the 7 counties and
Yeah.
have them all at the same table?
Yeah,
Maybe that could be
absolutely.
a good next
I think
step.
after we kick that off with Dillon, we'll probably look at doing it for the surrounding communities
It's
as well.
crazy, what I've been hearing in Dillon is that there are 4 houses for sale here. In Sealy Lake, there were 3 and they were all over $700,000.
Yeah,
I-
and
So,
you can afford that.
That
yeah.
would be a good, maybe we could do that as, what is something that you see in Butte that is an example of, sort of a leading the way, or this is an innovative thing that you're seeing Butte do that could potentially be explored by other, is there
I think the housing
anything
plan was a
you're-
good start to all of that. I think the housing plan is definitely the core.
that they're sitting down and bringing the community in and
Community, yeah,
engaging?
and the community here everyone works very well together,
Yeah,
you know, so everyone's kind
Yeah.
of working towards that common goal.
so that's kind of a way that you would, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
thanks.
I know that's, this is really unique to Butte, but the Urban Revitalization Agency in Butte, the URA, has been extremely helpful, I think, in motivating and creating, momentum in the Uptown Butte district for redevelopment of the upper town, of the bigger buildings.
Is that a government-created little agency, or is that private, or what
You
is
are,
it?
it's urban renewal district, it's allowed through state law.
Okay,
It's a tax, they utilize tax
It's under
increment
the TIF,
financing.
okay.
Urban renewal and TEDS are.
Dead dip, or?
Yeah. They utilize tax increment financing to accomplish those goals.
Okay,
yes.
I think we have one here.
I wanted just to touch on one thing that Kelly just touched on, Lima, the small town of Lima, their whole housing stock is turning into recreational stock, and so they said that they're at risk of losing their school because
Yeah,
the
I heard
people
that.
that live in Lima can't buy a house that have kids there because everybody that is buying up the houses in Lima are, you know, recreational and seasonal people that have taken away the housing stock.
That's happening across the entire Western District. I mean, that's happening in Lincoln County as well, so I think if we can figure out what are some good, you know, and so, okay. And then we'll maybe do a rapid fire.
So, I'm Raylene Brandel. I'm a candidate for chief executive, and then I'm with the Clark Fork Watershed Education Program at Montana Tech, and have been deeply involved in some of the workforce development programs that you were hearing about earlier. Specifically, and also, you know, very tapped into what's going on with our 20-somethings. I have a 27-year-old who's living with me right now, so, but I have a couple of issues. First of all, I agree with everything that's been presented so far about Butte's opportunities for developable land, making sure that we have infrastructure into that developable land, and then looking at federal programs that can maybe enhance and support what we have going on locally with regard to, you know, we talked about urban revitalization funding. Can't we do that from the federal level as well to have more money there? And then talking about what Mr. Shea had represented regarding the investment class and the people that have invested in houses. What I've been hearing from realtors and from buyers is that when we have these investors, they're giving enough, I guess, revitalization to the home, that they can now up the price, and then it's getting sold and resold within the investors, and then at the end of the terminus of that, then the price is really high, and then when the actual single family wants to come buy that house, that they're almost priced out of the market. So looking at what we have in regards to incentivizing getting those houses sold to people who are going to live in them for longer than, a couple of years, I think is important.
I think you said owner occupied.
Owner occupied.
Owner occupied, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, we've been hearing about that quite a bit. The second issue that hasn't been addressed, other than to talk about infrastructure, is looking at our water supply in Butte. We think of ourselves as water rich because we're at the headwaters. But that is not going to be the case in the next 50 years. When we look at the 2040 horizon with climate change and our drought, we are going to be out of water quicker than we think. And so looking at how we can incentivize infrastructure that will support water reuse and water recycling within the county, I think is going to be critically important. And I imagine the other counties that you're looking at serving also need that.
Well, Montana is a headwater state, which gives
Yeah.
us some unique opportunities,
Yeah.
but challenges.
Yeah, lots of
And
challenges.
with the snowpack shifting or.
Yeah, and right, the
Yeah.
climate models look at 2040, we're going to have, well over 60 days and, about 80 degrees. So we have to really be thinking about what that plan looks like, not just today's plan.
And
but
what water
housing.
storage looks like.
I think Gary and I were having a sidebar conversation about Gallatin County right now being out of water and looking at building a $15 billion infrastructure plan to move water from Canyon Ferry to Gallatin County.
Yeah.
So how do we plan for that and have us, thinking about this
Water
ahead
will
of
flow
time?
upstream in Montana.
Yeah.
We could do anything here.
Yeah. We could do anything. But it's just a mere 15 billion.
I mean,
Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah.
So I think infrastructure planning and more infrastructure money for
Yeah.
counties is going to be important.
Great, okay, and I want everybody to have a chance, so why don't we go Bill, and then we'll do have both of you weigh in really quickly as well.
I'm Bill Foley. I'm running for chief executive as well. A couple things that really strike a nerve with me, I guess, we're talking about long-term plans, which is really important. I had a friend call me a few weeks ago, tell me, his rent went skyrocketed. He's gonna be evicted from his house because his landlord is moving his daughter into that house. And he's legitimately fearing living on the streets because the rent in Butte has more than doubled over the last several years. It's gone up drastically. I wouldn't know the exact number, Gary probably know the number, but his rent in particular more than doubled over less than 5 years. And those are real concerns. Is we have 20-year plans, 50-year plans. I think we need a 20-minute plan, for people who are going to be on the streets. Bozeman, they call it urban camping. I always laugh at that idea. If they called it homelessness, working class homelessness like it is, maybe they start addressing the issue.
Is that an issue in Butte?
It
I mean,
is.
I've heard
It's-
in Kalispell, Missoula, Bozeman.
You're seeing
Is
it. You're seeing
it
it,
is
yeah.
here.
Yeah, you're seeing it and we're seeing homeless camps and stuff, which,
Mhm.
I mean, some homeless problems, some people, you can't solve all homelessness, really easily, some people don't wanna live,
But you have working.
but we have working class people who wanna do that, and
Mhm.
we talked about some of the houses, like, JP mentioned the Telmar, is it Telmar, is that how you say it? That housing? Tullymore houses, they built those, not for, you can actually see where they're built on the picture over there, but in that time they built them, they built a bunch of houses on Missoula Avenue, and I think people were buying them for right around $70,000, which funny enough seemed expensive at the time for me, it was, 25 plus years ago or so. And now some of those houses are not, they went up for sale and they were bought by people who are running Airbnbs. And that is a serious issue. I've seen other communities like Bozeman has worked on that.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a complex issue. Besides, you tell somebody you own this property, you should be able to own your property. But when you own that property and you're running Airbnbs,
Mhm.
then it's driving the price of housing up for single families.
Yeah.
And it's an issue that needs to be addressed, because that's like the people I know who have houses are coming like their grandparents died and they have a house they're fixing up. They're like, oh, I'm not gonna sell it, I'm just gonna make it an Airbnb and make more money. Or,
So let's do, thank you, Bill, so let's do both of you, and then just as a heads up, so you guys can get this prepared in your minds, what I've been doing in the super interesting information I'm getting is, we're gonna do a rapid fire roundup. So you get 30 seconds to a minute to say, if you were writing federal legislation, what would you write? What's your one most important to ask? So we're gonna go back around and say, what you heard, what you think of the issue in Butte, and what is your single most important ask?
We got Barb on here too as well.
Oh, I'm sorry, Barb. So should we do Barb for a minute, and then we'll do both of you guys, and then we'll do a rapid fire roundup. Barb, can you hear? I can't see you. All I can see is a green B in the middle of the screen. No, you just put it on mute or something. Well, why don't you go, and then we'll come back to Barb.
Now, coming from a Republican, this is anathema, and it's a federal program, but rents have gone up so fast and so high that we're creating homeless people every single day simply because they can no longer afford the house they're living in. And a temporary program of some type that locked rent controls until the whole housing program was addressed and you had more available. If you don't do that, we're gonna double the homeless people in the next 6 months. I don't know if you've been following that at all, Monica, but it's really an issue.
I see your hat. Anything from a veteran's perspective?
People have been really nice to veterans. Let them do things like this, things they shouldn't. So, I like Gary's comment on that rent control because something has to be done.
On a temporary
On
basis.
a temporary basis.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for that. And Evan, do you want to go? Or Barb, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I've been working on housing, affordable housing here for more than 30 years in Butte. First multi-development was 1981, and then we partnered with Butte Silverbow that whole way on different aspects of this problem. The crisis, as we see it, was caused by, there were years where HUD built way fewer units, and they put all their money into retrofit. Butte did get $30 million in retrofit money for the public housing renovation, but when you stop building at any time, you're gonna be in trouble. And then the next thing is the investors came in and they did just buy up everything in a certain range, and they put very little into it and got it back onto the market again. And right now, we're building 16 homes in southwest Montana, 9 in Butte, 7 in Whitehall, and we have 15 units starting this year and finishing next year in the Phoenix building, 3rd floor. We have 3 more floors above that and plan to keep going. We think it's critical that the housing plan that comes out here shortly has a need for 2,000 housing units in Butte in the period in question. And there's more than 2,500 existing homes that are in terrible shape, but addressing them will cost twice as much as building 2,500 units. The manufactured housing that's being proposed is very expensive. So we have been going to the mode of self-help building, and all those homes, the 16 homes, are being built by the owners with money from USDA, for which we are eligible. On the federal level, if there's going to be any kind of legislation dealing with investment housing across the country, it's everywhere, and it's everywhere in Montana. And so that's the way the rents went up. I mean, people are very unhappy because the rents are high and it's hard to buy a car.
Yeah.
So the main things in life, are critical.
Great. Thanks, Barb.
The other thing, okay.
No, you were gonna say one last thing?
Oh, I was just gonna say, Butte and Anaconda have the extra detail of having a great deal of pollution in housing stock. So it isn't like other places. And we're thrilled that EPA is starting to look at a lower action level maybe for Butte. We think that's a critical element and hope that it happens. Butte has significantly more disabled adults under 65 than normal communities in Montana, and we think that's a direct correlation.
Great, that's helpful. Thanks, Barb. Let's have Evan, why don't you wrap up quickly, and then we'll do a rapid fire. You got kind of swept into the rapid fire.
Well, I'll start the rapid fire, I guess. I think there's unique opportunities here in Butte with us being a historic district. And that legislatively, you may want to try to explore some avenues where special programs are available which would help in significant historical districts. Interest rate reductions that would be available for retrofitting, stuff with fire suppression when you have historic buildings that can't be used, but we want to keep them and use them. Think of some kind of a program that, while it, like most federal programs, you know, has to broadly apply here, but if it's tailored enough, it'll narrowly approach to certain kinds of districts, such as
That
the
they
one
could
we
tap
have.
into the bucket of dollars for
Yeah,
the very
yeah,
specific
we
now.
could have some special stuff that can, when you combine the housing need with the historic district and have some incentives built into that, we can go a lot further, but yeah, I think that's one, real significant possibility for Butte.
Yeah, that's actually great. So you'll have one more chance to wrap up for our rapid fire roundup. So JP, let's hear you. What did you hear and what do you want?
Well, I think that there's a lot of things that could be done at you know, the national level that you could bring in, but I think the direct allocation, when we talked about ARPA funds, we don't have to have that middleman of the state, and sometimes, you know, the state doesn't have the best interest of the local government. I think local government is able to derive what they need for their housing in the community. I believe that the programs that are there, the reduced rates that could be there. Also, when there's grant funding available and there's match that's required, that they don't always make the match contingent upon local hard money match. Because we've been really creative locally here to use programs that are, you know, where we could cobble together a couple different grant programs. When we can do that, it allows us to get more done. So sometimes, you know, that hard money match for local government, we're all pinched by property taxes and stuff. So anytime that we're okay with matches,
Right.
but if
The source
shouldn't
okay,
be
got it.
tied to
Got it.
just hard money from the local governments.
Those are very specific.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Helpful. Gary.
30 seconds. So I'm going to be consistent. I think at the federal level, consider tax policies effective has on housing. I think one of the things that's been reinforced a little bit since I talked is that the investor community has really taken up a lot of the supply that could be released to the owner occupants and try to create some tax policies for some tax credits or lower capital gains that would allow that to happen. And that's kind of already active at the federal level. So if I had to pick one thing, that would be it. And then I'll reinforce too that anything that the federal government can do to help out with infrastructure development will be really, really important.
Those are really helpful.
And Butte's in a great place, and I'm really looking forward to the future. So
Yeah. Thank you. Super helpful.
I really like the idea of interest rate accommodations for retrofitting buildings or federal assistance for retrofitting buildings. Just because, I mean, I know it's cheaper to build new than it is to retrofit, but as all of that housing stock and things go to waste, they end up in the landfill.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a cost there that's not being accounted for, so sadly. But I would like to see, there's already infrastructure to those buildings, so we should be using them in some way or shape or form.
And just spitballing here, I mean, that's specific to Butte in terms of retrofitting, but if there could be some kind of preservation or conservation, yeah. No,
And I think tie
yeah.
it to ownership, tie it to
Yep.
affordability. I mean, all of those
So
things
people
are okay,
are
so it's
thinking
not
their roots
invested.
down here.
Yep.
Yeah, got
Yep.
it.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we're getting to a theme here. Okay, Julie.
So I really like the idea of direct allocation to counties. I think that's worked very well for us. I also like the idea of capital gains modification, incentivized sale, and I thought Evan's idea was really fantastic for interest rate reductions to help with modifications that moves beyond just like a historic building tax credit, but moves into maybe reducing costs for those people that are trying to bring something online.
Great.
Yeah.
These are great.
I think some kind of restriction on Airbnbs and vacation homes, not taking that inventory away. Just kind of like what JP talked about, the situation in Lima. You know, it's, you know, they just don't have anything available. So families aren't buying and the school's going to close.
Getting a handle on what supply really means. Yeah, I think that's a bigger component than I think we've really pushed into. We haven't developed that so much today, but yeah.
I agree with my colleagues on the immediate need for rent control and some, you know, relief that way before we create more homelessness. But I also agree with looking at the investment, pieces and making sure that we have the right tax incentives to get those homes for sale, and then direct investment in communities. And I think with the urban revitalization, I think that would have a lot of federal play, because we're not the only community that has
Yeah.
a lot of old buildings that would like to be reinhabited.
Right.
So I think that would be lucrative
Okay.
for the rest of the country as well.
Yeah, Bill, 30 seconds, go.
Well,
We're
I
gonna
guess
do this.
nationally, I'd like to see some kind of legislation to hold bad landlords accountable. You know, people come and they just raise the rent, and they don't do anything with the property, and the only what out course for the renter is to move. And
Whoever that landlord
yeah,
would be.
and
Yeah.
we see and hear horror stories about that in you know, the people I talk to.
Thank you.
If I ship all the immigrants from California back to the rest of
How about Texas? Okay. Evan.
I just would reiterate that, I think we are gonna make, when you think of, we have the tools, we have the URA, we have a huge inventory of opportunity here in a historical way. If anything we do federally, would apply to other urban revitalization areas, but we have unique circumstances that we should tailor legislation to that limits the financial impact and gets stuff done for you.
Let's get stuff done for Montana. Thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of this. I really appreciate it. I think it's really laying that groundwork for meaningful legislation that will create meaningful change for Western Montana. So next steps for me would be to what's the logical sort of regional piece of this, and let's put that together.
That sounds great.
Headed to Bozeman to do one there this afternoon. And I think then figuring out what's the Venn diagram. You know, I met with the folks in Anaconda, so maybe we do a regional one, and then maybe we do a Western District one, or kind of figuring that out. Would really invite your further input. I'm easy to reach, Monica at monicatranel.com. Comes to me, I read it. And I'm really interested in figuring out real solutions. This is my home. I don't have another one. I live here, I'm raising my kids here, I buy my groceries here, I pay taxes here, and I'm interested in making our communities work for us and look like us, and I want my 3 kids to be able to live here.
Monica, I'd like to make a serious comment, Billy.
Okay.
This is the 3rd time you've been here to talk to groups of people about what's going on down at the community gut level. And you're the only politician in the entire state that's done that or is doing that. And I have the utmost respect for you and want to thank you, because you set what used to be the community meetings and asking people what they thought, and thank you so much.
I mean, government works best when it works at the local level. I mean, you know your towns, right? So you're welcome, but this is my home. So thank you. Thanks, everyone. Okay, more to come. Yeah.